Okay, I think we got through our technical difficulties there. What is up? My name is Rochelle Renee. I'm an intuitive health coach and healer, and this is episode 84 of Faith, Fitness, Joy. Today, I am discussing what a spiritual awakening is. It is Wonderful Wednesday, and on Wednesdays, I like to discuss all things related to our spiritual growth, our spiritual well-being, connecting to God, and I also like to do channeled messages on these Wonderful Wednesdays as well. So here we are. So again, we're talking about spiritual awakening today. You may be seeing a lot of people talking about this online. If you're on TikTok, there's quite a few people that provide different kind of regular videos or teachings around this topic, and I'm sure on YouTube and all kinds of other platforms. There seems to be a growing interest, if you will, around this topic. And my own spiritual awakening process began several years back now. In some ways, I feel like it started maybe about a decade ago, but I would say it really kind of ramped up in the last several years. And so recently, let's see, in the last maybe year or 2 years, probably about 2 years now, I've been in sort of a deep process of spiritual awakening, if you will. And so God has recently started nudging me to discuss this topic with you all here on this podcast, starting to share some of my own story about it and just going a little deeper into this topic and helping people just understand what it is, and also to help people that are starting to wake up navigate through the process. I believe that this is because even more people are either beginning to wake up or will be embarking on a spiritual awakening in this year in particular. And I sort of sense, if you will, that this is going to be continuing to increase in years to come. So today I am going to discuss first what a spiritual awakening is. Second, some of the signs and symptoms of a spiritual awakening to help you recognize whether this is what you are, experiencing yourself, and how to navigate a spiritual awakening. So in some respects, I have been on a spiritual awakening from a fairly young age. I started kind of questioning everything, every aspect of existence as far back as I can remember, honestly. Even at times when I was a kid, I remember a number of times in particular being at my grandmother's house and being in her guest room and trying to fall asleep at night and finding myself, pondering all of these questions. Things like, why are we here? What if the earth is just like this tiny little speck on the hand of a larger creature, or like a giant or something like that? And I used to think about, like, what if there's someone that, like, watches earth or the world, and just observes what people do all day, every day, and just like kind of random stuff like that I used to think about when I was younger. As I got older, I started questioning religion and wondering what the truth really is, of God, of why we're here, and some of the different stories. Because as I started to become aware, that there's, what is it, 3,000, 5,000, somewhere in that range, that's like the number of religions that there are. It kind of like, when you actually like think about that, it begs the question, well, like, is any one of them like correct or accurate, or how do you know what the truth is? What's, what is it really? And now I was raised Catholic, and I went to Catholic school until about the fourth grade. So there's very specific kind of rituals, if you will. The services are very, I guess you could say, ritualistic. There's like a very formal process to it, and you receive what are called sacraments as you grow up and reach certain ages in the church. And then so that was kind of my upbringing and what I grew up being taught in terms of religion. And then as I got older, and like I said, I started questioning what the truth is and looking into other things, I sort of veered off this path. And I started to become really fascinated with witchcraft, specifically Wicca, which I studied really thoroughly like really thoroughly. I, know the history really well of that faith. And I mean, it's a broad term. You ask, 50 people that identify as that, and you'll probably get that many answers because there's, very diverse teachings and approaches and whatnot within that category. Just like, almost any other religion, Christianity is another one that's a very big kind of umbrella category of a number of different beliefs or systems or I guess you could say culture, if you will, around that. So, but the point is, it was something that I went into and I studied it very deeply, very thoroughly, and I practiced that for about 15 years. And I'm not going to go into all the different, stories around that because it's a whole, it's a whole other topic for another time. But I did get to a point where, I had some experiences that just, I started to question that as well. And it kind of led me to seeking answers again, I guess you could say. And what I think that taught me at the time is that I realized, like, even that, like, I wasn't really experiencing this connection with God that I was seeking. And I didn't feel like I had found the truth of, creation and what we are, and even maybe who God is. I never questioned God's existence. I would not say that, but I just hadn't found the thing that I was able to experience him with. And so eventually, like I said, I realized that the Wicca, Wicca wasn't answering my questions really any more than Catholicism had. And I felt like it wasn't really, I just wasn't getting much out of it, I guess, after a certain point. And I was seeking a deeper, level of connection to God, and I was seeking spiritual growth. So later, I reached a point of simply accepting that, I definitely believed in God. I definitely believed that there is God. I would say now, I don't feel like it's a matter of belief. I know that there is. And this is my personal experience, so I don't want this to come off like I'm trying to push anything on anyone. I'm just, kind of sharing my own story. And so as for the truth of what God really is, or which story, or, you can substitute story with religion, which of those was accurate reflection, that had kind of remained a mystery for me for some time. And then it was like when I found myself at the end of the proverbial rope, if you will, my marriage was coming to an end. It had been, I would say, about a year that I kind of knew that was coming, and I would say, things were escalating at this point. And I had just gotten to this point where I didn't know what else to do except reach up for answers. And I was really trying to get guidance from God as to, how to handle this or navigate this situation I found myself in. And so that was a point where I just sort of turned to him, and that led me back into, or actually it led me into a Christian church in the months leading up to and after my ex-husband and I had split. And so this sort of marked the beginning of my first real relationship with God. Yes, there was community in the church, and yes, there was like the church itself and all of the things that come with that. But through this particular church and the different things that they had as part of their culture, so there was, the typical Sunday services, of course, like any other or most other churches. But they also had prayer groups, and they had, which was actually how I came into it. My best friend was hosting one, and she was asking me to, consider attending. And so that's kind of how I found my way into this church. And ultimately, that is what helped me to, like, deepen and establish this relationship with God, was because I was doing the work in this workbook. So it wasn't just attending the services, but I was, reading the Bible outside of church, and I was spending time with God and, like, working through these questions in this workbook that went with the I guess you could say, the topic or the book that we were working through as part of this prayer group. And in doing that, it helped me to learn how to like connect to God and understand kind of how he speaks to us, and also gaining a deeper understanding of the Bible as well. So I continued to deepen my relationship with God and attend church for many years after that. And this carried me through, the darkest points in my life. I even experienced things that I can only describe as supernatural in this time frame. And this is why I say I know there's a God. Because for me, I don't have any other way of explaining or understanding the things that I experienced during this time and what God did for me in this part of my life. And so it was in this time that I started to hear God louder and more often, and I started learning how to follow his guidance, even when I was scared or uncertain. And I'd had enough of an experience with him at this point that I knew I could always trust his guidance, even if the things that he was leading me to do felt scary, or it felt like, gosh, can I really do this? Or it just kind of defied what, society would advise or tell you to do. So fast forward about a year ago, and God has since led me out of the church. And this hasn't, I don't mean this to be a criticism of church or any particular church or people that still attend church. Just to be clear, this is just the path that he's led me down and where he's taken me. And it seems to have served to lead me further within myself, and closer to him and closer to the truth, which is that God is not outside of us. He's not like somewhere out there or somewhere up there. I mean, yes, there is like this, the greater, God or source, if you will, that does exist kind of somewhat externally, but he also exists within each of us. He's not, in a building or a group or even in some distant place that we can't reach. He lives and dwells and resides within us. And the Bible says this point blank in many places, where it talks about, that your body being the temple. And one of the reasons that it's so important to take care of your body and not defile your temple is because God lives within you. And you're keeping it, pristine or clean or whatever you want to call it, for God to reside within you. So now when he kind of led me out of this, it wasn't like this burning bush moment in which, I suddenly came to understand that this was what I was to do. And it was really more of like an evolution that occurred as a result of my continuing to seek the truth and understand God. So I've come to understand that he simply was meeting me where I was at the time when I first reached up to him all those years ago, when I was, at this point of like, what am I going to do? And I really didn't know what else to do or who to turn to or how to get any other guidance. So that's been about 10 years ago almost now. And he led me to the things that I've come to understand today over this period of time. And so it was all things that kind of built on each other as I kept leaning in and doing different things and adopting different practices to deepen my own connection to God, further my own spiritual growth. And I also had like a real hunger at one point to really understand the Bible. I had gotten to a point where I was kind of like, sort of like at this, like, I don't want someone else to tell me what it means. I don't want someone to like, because I understood, I guess I realized at a point that that's how I understood it. Like I hadn't actually really read it. Everything I knew from the Bible or about the Bible or what was in the Bible had come through different church services that I had been at in, different points of my life. And I wanted to understand it and know it myself. And so that was kind of the first thing. And then through doing that and, prayer and meditation and some of these other things, that's how I started to learn how to like, receive communication from God and the different ways he speaks and moves in our lives and all of these things. And so they all kind of built on each other. And now I'm at a point where I would say, it's almost second nature. And there's a variety of ways that God communicates to me. So all that said, I also believe that many of us have started to have a spiritual awakening, or deepen the one that we are in the past maybe 3 to 4 years. I feel like, look back, what, 3, 4 years ago, where we were, what was going on. A lot of people were, went from our very hustle bustle, absolutely no time, you know, to suddenly we're not allowed to leave the house for what started off as 2 weeks and then extended from there. But that's a whole other story for another time. But the point is, we all were basically forced to be within our house for a number of time. We weren't supposed to be working. If we were working at home, or many of us were, right? And so I feel like at that point, a lot of people just started, we had time on our hands. We were preoccupied with all this stuff that was happening that was like unprecedented. And I think people just were starting to look for answers, and people were starting to like finally having a moment to be like, wait a minute, like what's really going on? What is really like we all started asking these questions that I think most of us would have never thought of before. So it was a really interesting time, and I think that's when a lot of people really started to wake up, and realize that maybe there's something bigger, maybe there's something more. And people just maybe started seeking truth and just looking at life a little differently than perhaps would have ever happened. I also believe that many more people are going to begin their spiritual awakening journey, in, like I said, this year in particular, and I think it's going to keep kind of increasing from there. So anyway, let's delve into what is a spiritual awakening exactly. Well, a spiritual awakening is a profound and transformative experience that transcends the boundaries of our everyday existence, right? It's like this door opening to a new realm of consciousness, of understanding. And that doorway and that realm is where our mind and our body and our soul start to align and find like this perfect harmony. But what exactly does it mean to undergo a spiritual awakening? So first, let's kind of break the concept down a little bit, right? A spiritual awakening is like a process of an inner awakening, where we start to become aware of our true nature and that we are connected to something greater than ourselves. That it can't just be like maybe like all this randomness and just by chance, right? Like there's some greater meaning, and there's this greater connection between all living things. And we start to become more aware of our true nature, and we start to connect to something beyond ourselves. And it's really not confined to a religion or a cultural context. It's more of a universal phenomenon that can occur to anyone, anywhere, at any time. And it really, like I said, it doesn't really have anything to do with religion. So the awakening process, or the awakening, will often bring about a heightened sense of awareness, a deeper connection with the present moment, and a profound understanding of how everything in life is interconnected, everything in the world. I think the deeper you go into this, at least this has been the experience for me, the more I understand that we are all connected down to everything, not just animals, but and some of this is as you start to understand that everything in nature, everything in creation is, it has a vibration. It all has energy. Everything is frequency, everything is energy. And so even a rock has a frequency. It may not be a super high one, but it has a frequency. And so that it's like this common thread through everything that has been created. And that is what connects us all. And so you start to get a deeper sense of this as you go along in your journey. So what are some signs that you might experience as you're having a spiritual awakening? Or what are some ways you can maybe know that you're having one? So, again, like, how would you know it was happening to you if if you're not familiar with any of this and you aren't really sure that that's what you're going through? Well, it often starts to manifest through a series of signs and symptoms, and these can include things like your intuition seems to be getting heightened. Um, and then there's a few other things that I'm going to touch on that you might start to experience as well. So for me, it started with questions that I could no longer like ignore or try to explain away as like just the way it is, or it's just nature, or I don't know, like whatever things that we kind of tend to go to or have been taught over the course of our life. Those answers weren't really working for me. And then I started to realize a lot of them didn't really add up. And so, and in some cases, a lot of them were sort of proving not even really true. And they started to feel like they weren't true. Like, and then like, should I scratch the surface and see like if this holds up after I dig into it more? So this is one of the keys, is sort of feeling like not everything's quite as it seems. And maybe not everything that you've been taught or told or whatever is completely true or accurate. In a spiritual awakening, your intuition will start to kick in. As I mentioned a second ago, it'll start to get louder, it'll start to get more intense, and it'll gradually start to feel more and more difficult to continue to participate in sort of day-to-day life in the same way. It'll start to like almost be unbearable. I feel like the deeper that you go, depending on what your day-to-day life is, there's a lot of people out there that are, maybe not in the same place that I was several years back, where, they're not really feeling totally fulfilled in some aspects of their life, or they might feel like they're kind of pulling themselves through their day-to-day because they know they have to be in a job, and like that's just part of life kind of a thing. So anyway, I'll leave it at that for this. But another sign is that, and this is a fairly substantial one, is that you may experience sort of a shift in perspective. So, for example, you might find that your focus expands beyond the things that used to be of the highest importance to you. And these things may start to feel less and less important or even small. It could be things that you used to like to do, that you used to really enjoy. I mean, I think back on a certain period of my life where there was a number of like shows that I really liked, and I really wanted to like catch up on them, and I wanted to watch them before anyone started talking about it or anything like that, and like would ruin whatever happened in the show, or that's just an example. Or other times like in my life, but when I was like before I had kids and I was single, I really like wanted to go out a lot, and yeah, just go out to clubs or whatever, or go do different things, and just these different things that maybe you had habits of, or that were part of your like things you enjoyed doing, that all of a sudden you're just kind of not that interested in doing them anymore, and you're looking for something deeper, or for whatever reason those same things just aren't really bringing the same excitement or fulfillment to you that they used to. And part of this is because you're going to start to feel like there's more to life, and there's more to reality, and that you have a greater purpose. I've joked in the past in some of my episodes about Office Space, and how I always used to say that Peter Gibbons was like my spirit animal, because he always used to say like, the whole joke in the movie was that he had this dream of doing nothing, but he also used to say like, human beings were not meant to sit in little cubicles listening to 8 different bosses drone on all day about TPS reports. And I mean, I think there's a lot of truth to that. Like that was part of my experience, was like, is this really why we're here? Is this really why we exist? So that we can, I mean, is what I'm doing in this little cubicle really like, having that impact, so I mean, those are some of the questions I think you start to ask yourself. And again, it depends, because I know this won't apply to everybody, and not everybody may have this exact experience with where they are right now. Another sign that you might be having a spiritual awakening is if you start to desire personal growth. So this was actually one of the first ones for me, I think, in recent years. Because like I said, I started to lose interest in some of the other stuff like television or movies or, um, hanging out with girlfriends and stuff like that. Not that I never wanted to see my girlfriends anymore, but it was just, I guess my priorities started shifting and I wanted to um, learn new things. I wanted to deepen my understanding and my personal growth. So that might be something you start to experience. And this might look like, you start reading and watching different things than you did in the past. Your reading list might change from, just things you've read for entertainment or enjoyment to start reading things to learn how to start your own business or to learn how to um, change your mindset or something like along those lines, or maybe devotional books or different things that help deepen your spiritual growth. So you might start to really crave things like that. And like I said, other things you used to find enjoyable might start to just naturally fall away. And then for me, like I said, this was one of the first things I experienced. And so I started reading various self-help and personal growth books, and I started investing in myself as well and my growth. And so I have invested quite a bit, and I use all of that to help other people. So now it's like clients who work with me, people who are getting access to any of my programs or anything along those lines, they're getting access to all of these different investments I've made in myself and things that I've learned because I've integrated all of that. And it's quite a breadth of things that I have invested in myself, from either from books to courses to coaching programs and masterminds and kind of everything in between. So then, finally, as you start to move through your spiritual awakening, another thing that you might start to experience is this profound sense of inner peace. It's not really uncommon to start to feel a sense of detachment from other aspects of reality, particularly the material and material possessions. And you'll start to have a deeper connection to things like nature. And again, you'll start to crave different things. You'll start to want to spend your time in different ways. And I think a lot of this too is like underneath all of this is this sort of shift in perspective that starts to happen. And you start to realize how small some of these things really are that maybe you tended to make of a bigger importance. And the things that really matter start to rise to the surface or get become bigger in proportion in terms of the value that you place on them. So it's essential to recognize that a spiritual awakening is a unique and personal experience for sure. And like I said, these are some of the signs that you might be having one, but even these are going to vary from person to person. The intensity that you experience them, whether you experience all of them, some of them, and there could even be some others that, I didn't go into here that you might experience. But the underlying sort of essence remains the same, that it's a journey towards self-realization and, spiritual enlightenment. So then the third thing I wanted to talk about is how can you navigate a spiritual awakening? So, it might sound wonderful to have a spiritual awakening, and a lot of things, like I know for me before I was even in the midst of this, you know, you might have like kind of some stereotypes about it, like it's all about love and light, tra la la. And it's really not quite like that. I mean that there's moments of that for sure, but it's really challenging actually in a lot of ways, but in a good way, because you're learning new things, you're expanding your understanding, and in a lot of ways, part of it is, and what's going to be happening is you're going to be confronted with the truth, and that's going to mean that sometimes you're going to be faced with that you've been taught things that are not true. You've been led to believe things that are not really true, that are not necessarily reflective of how things really are or why we're really here. And that can be difficult. The movie The Matrix comes to mind a lot with this, because you think about how, if you've seen that movie, the gist is that it's like we're all in sort of this simulation, and people start to kind of wake up to that. And if you, depending on how old you are or whatever, it can be really scary and difficult. So it's similar in that sense, because it's sort of this process of coming to terms with um, things that we've been taught that aren't necessarily the case for whatever reason. So that's why I say it's not always really sunshine and rainbows. And I think, like I said, part of that is because through this process, it's a journey within. So you're being guided throughout the awakening to go within yourself. And part of that is a spiritual, not a spiritual, but like a period of isolation. So people might start to fall away, or you might start to remove yourself from certain relationships or people. And it doesn't necessarily mean it's good or bad. It just starts to happen because your focus is changing. And this work really requires at least some period of time where you're kind of in isolation to really do this deeper work and connecting to your soul and your spiritual self and God. So I'd also, like I said, it also is going to involve you facing aspects of yourself that perhaps you've ignored or suppressed or were completely blind to, like myself. I think it was probably all of the above. But I also found there was a lot of things I was totally blind to that until I sort of started embarking on this path. Um, so it's really important to embrace mindful practices and meditation and self-reflection and giving yourself a lot of time and space and grace as you navigate the process, because it's a transformation. It's very much a deconditioning, right? Like there's certain things that we have been conditioned for as part of growing up in the world. And so as a spiritual awakening process is happening, a lot of that is being like you're deconditioning yourself from that. You are changing the programming that you've been raised with. And depending on your age, that can be a challenge. I think it's challenging at any age, but I guess my point is like being 44 myself, like that's 44 years of it that I've been, working through. It's gonna be a lot harder to turn that around than it might be if I had started this process at say 20, right? So just something to note. But remember, you're not alone on this journey. There's a lot of other people out there that are on the same journey, seeking the same thing. So I would encourage you to seek guidance from spiritual mentors, connect with like-minded individuals on social media. There's tons of places for this online and in Facebook and other, platforms. And embrace the wisdom, that you're going to start receiving, and just trust yourself through the process and trust God to lead you through it. This path of awakening is, like I said, it's unique for everyone, but it's also like this shared journey that creates like this really sort of beautiful, I don't know, like tapestry of consciousness collectively among everyone that's involved in it. So another resource for you if you want to continue in this path and don't know where to start is I do have a private Facebook group where I do support some of this through that. And I also offer coaching along the lines of helping people with this whole process and coming into alignment and some of the inner work that's necessary. But like I said, there's a number of other places you can find this as well. So my private Facebook group is called Faith, Fitness, Joy as well. So you can check that out. And there's a link in the episode description if you want to find that later. But as I wrap up today's episode, I just want to encourage you to embrace the unfolding of the journey, because it is really, like I said, even though it can be challenging, it's like a really great ride at the same time. And it's really an incredible, beautiful journey if you can kind of keep yourself in that space of allowing it and just receiving what comes and allowing it to flow and allowing yourself to flow through it. So the other thing about it is it's not a destination. It's not like a short term or like something that happens in this little magical window of time or anything like that. It's very much kind of a continuous and ongoing experience. Because like I explained earlier, for me, it starts off with, it's just kind of one step and one delving into a certain question at a certain time, and then that gives you a new level of understanding. It takes you to a new level of consciousness, and then from there you start to go to the next one and the next one. And it's just kind of this, it builds upon itself and it continues over time. So enjoy that process and allow it to flow from wherever you're starting. Try not to, get into the comparison trap, which is, really difficult for a lot of us and something a lot of us struggle with. So as always, I really hope that you found this helpful. I hope it's blessed you in some way. And thank you for joining me today in this enlightening conversation that I will be continuing in different points in my wonderful Wednesday episodes of this podcast. So stay tuned as we'll continue to talk about this in the weeks and months to come. But for now, I hope it's given you some clarity on what a spiritual awakening is. And like I said, check out that Facebook group if you want to connect with some others that are also in a similar process and working towards similar things as well. So with that, I will thank you so much for joining me in today's episode of Faith, Fitness, Joy, and I will see you all next time.